Oh, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. A very warm welcome to Silver Tent TV. I'm your host, Siobhan. My beloved dog Elsa is at my feet, but there's a lot going on outside, so she may well join in at some point. Silver Tent is a place, a haven for women over 50 who are entering the autumn or winter of their lives and would like support and encouragement and nurturing to realise those dreams that have yet to be realised. And it's also a place to provide a platform for the sharing of the incredible wisdom of women over 50. We've been around the block a few times and we've developed some understanding and some real wisdom in life. And with that in mind, I'm delighted to welcome back to Silver Tent TV, Frances Amanda Briggs. Frances, a very, very warm welcome to you again.
Thank you, Siobhan. I feel it's a real treat to be with you again today, and I have I'm very excited to be talking about co-housing today.
Yes, and we did it, so do check out the show if you haven't already seen it. I had a lovely interview with Frances last week. We were really talking about her work as coach, and in international coach, with the power of and the wonderful opportunity of online and Zoom. Frances it's a master coach and gets to work with women all over the world. But we kept touching on co-housing, and we promised to come back and really have this conversation again. So one of the things that I'm leading on in the Silver Tent is the development of co-housing for women over 50. And that's because research and evidence has shown that if you want to live a life that promotes longevity, that is healthy, if you want to be vibrant and vital in your way of living, co-housing is one of the best ways of doing that in later life. And I've been pursuing that vision and that dream for the last year or so, along with our founder, Francesca Cassini. And we've made great inroads. We're now a legally constituted housing cooperative. We've managed to garner support and investment in building our business plan and ways that we can mobilise money. And we're going to be a rural co-housing project. And just before we start talking about Frances and her amazing expertise and wisdom around co-housing, I'm just going to tell you and define, for those of you not familiar, co-housing is where you each have your own independent accommodation. And the idea then is that you then have that around a shared space. And that's a shared physical space where you can gather and eat food together. But it's also about shared resources as well. Shared washing machines, shared bulk buying of food, that sort of thing. And Frances, you spent 4 years at Findhorn at a very critical moment in its development, where it was moving from that kind of community and transitioning into co-housing. So I wanted to begin, for those of us not familiar with Findhorn, can you first of all tell us a bit about Findhorn itself?
Well, Findhorn is, I think, more commonly known as a community. It's probably now known as more of an educational center, but when I went to Findhorn, it was a spiritual community way north, about an hour north of Inverness in Scotland, on the edge of a bay. And I was, for me, it was the greatest model that I had discovered of collaboration, of cooperation, and of people living together. But as you say, in their independent dwellings, most of which at that time were caravans. And we were making this transition in the community where some people had built whiskey barrel houses. So literally houses, round houses that were made from recycled whiskey barrels. And then it sort of mushroomed from there into what it is now, which is a really state-of-the-art leading sustainability model for collaborative housing.
Now, we have a lot of interest in the Silver Tent in co-housing, particularly for later years. And there are lots of different conversations happening globally, conversations with women in America, conversations with women in Europe, as well as in the UK. And obviously, I'm leading the development here in Wales. So I think for those women that are interested in co-housing as a solution to elder care, what would be some of the first things you would encourage them to consider from your experience at Findhorn?
Well, first of all, hi, Ribs.
Well, Kat, welcome.
Yeah, he's wanting a bit of attention. Anyway, he just wanted to say hi.
Yeah.
First of all, I think, Siobhan, it's important to address how we got here, firstly, to really be able to understand how we meet the need. And I think all of us have a longing for belonging. And more so women who are over 50, we make up the largest demographic. Women over 50 are the largest demographic in the world. So we have a compounded and very interesting thing happening where we have not only that longing for belonging, because no one as an elder wants to die alone. I mean, let's just put it as bluntly as that. And of course, what community and co-housing does is it meets that need for the longing for belonging. But more than that, when I was at Findhorn, and it was kind of like almost a luxury lifestyle, if you could live like that, it's now a necessity, because our society, unfortunately, has broken down to the extent, specifically in white communities, Caucasian, Western communities, because here in South Africa and throughout Africa, what we have is the elders being taken back into the house. They're back into the home. They're not separate from. They're not put into little boxes like we do with our elders. And that transforms a community and society greatly, because that voice of the elder, that narrative and all of the law of the ages is lost. And so there are multiple reasons for wanting to create co-housing. And I think I understand your motivation, and I understand what you're saying about wanting to have frail care and shared pooled resources and shared facilities. I also think that there's something so much greater than that happening. Anyway, carry on.
Well, I was just going to say yes, because that's exactly where did we come from in terms of my vision of co-housing. Yes. That was born, it was actually the last 6 weeks of my mum's life, where she had dementia. She was on the dementia pathway, and she'd essentially gone. There was just her body left. And I sat with her every day. I had the privilege of being with her every day. And I sat with her every day, and there was very little engagement that she was capable of by the end. So I would sit there and I would look around, and she ended up in state care. And I thought, I really don't want to end up like this. And it was actually accompanying her through to her end of life that the vision was born in me. And I kind of thought, well, what do I want? Well, I want to die in my own home. I do not want to end up in state care. And I want to die surrounded by kindred spirits, and that sense of that tribe. There's Elsa just joining in and agreeing with us as well. And so that's why our co-housing does have that kind of emphasis on end of life as much as vitality and vibrancy.
Well, I think, first of all, I just want to say a deep bow to both you and Francesca, because you're an inspiration to all of us who are in this very same position. Both my parents, my mother's 91, my father's 89, both of them are in care facilities. Both of them have Alzheimer's, and it is the most distressing and depressing thing for me to visit them. So I totally get where you're coming from, and I totally commend you for all that you're doing. So thank you. Thank you for what you're doing. And I think that, you know, you asked me what would I say are important elements around this. Something I learned very valuable things living at Findhorn, and I realize now in retrospect, so much on what I learned from that experience. And I often idealize it, but it probably was the most difficult time of my life, because it is very, very hard to live in, you know, yes, we can retreat to our own houses, but if you're part of a cooperation or a collaboration, you have to show up. And if you don't show up, you get called out. And so there's more possibility of one being forced to grow, which I did. I mean, it was literally like I was tested on every single possible level, but that's another story. I think the most important thing, Siobhan, is, first of all, as I've spoken about, that there is something, you know, after Findhorn, I traveled to a lot of different communities all over the world. And I've never found anything like it. And it wasn't that I wanted to compare, because obviously I lived for quite a while at Findhorn, so I had a, you know, much more intimate experience with it. But the one glaring thing, you know, after visiting Esalen Institute in California, Mount Shasta, and Brighton Bush in Oregon, and other communities in, you know, around the world, there were two things actually that stood out. One was the environment that was created, the actual physical environment. And I think the environment where co-housing or community or anything is established is essential. Where is that land? Why is that land selected? Why there? And I think this is very much something that one can't rationalize or think about. It is or it isn't. You know, communities exist in environments, and I just want to touch into something you asked me in our first interview, that wonderful chat we had last time. You said, "Tell me about the soul of interiors," and I didn't answer that question properly. And I want to say that the soul, the earth that you rest on and you establish your homes on, that's the first part. That's the first thing that has to be secured. There can be no threat of your water drying up, or your land being taken away, or servitude being, you know, a road coming through, or whatever. So the most important thing is that the environment on which you're going to build and grow your co-housing is secure. That is going to give you that solidity and that base.
It's so interesting that you say that, because our co-housing is going to be here in the part of Wales where I now live. I moved after Mum died. I moved down here to be with Francesca. And we've looked at other places, and still we keep coming back here. So there is something about the land here. And Llanidloes, where we're looking, is known as the heart chakra of Wales, because it's slap bang in the middle of Wales. And no matter what we do, and I was thinking about Llanidloes, why do I love it so much? And it's because it's a very open community. You know, the town is full of quite diverse people, you know, from people that have lived here all their lives to incomers. And in spite of that, it's very inclusive. It's okay if you're an incomer here. In other parts of Wales, you could go and you'll still be regarded as an outsider. Here, it's much more embracing. And the landscape is incredible. I'm kind of really just sitting with that. Oh, yeah, okay, there is a reason why we're here, physically and in terms of the landscape and the nature around here. And sorry, yeah, I was just going to say, and we're having exactly those conversations. How do we find land that we can keep protected and safe, and that we would want to steward as well?
I think that's very important. So I'm curious to know, have you been to this particular spot? Is it just the area, or have you found a specific piece of land, and have you and Francesca both walked it?
We have found land, and so it's very up in the air. So there's nothing more I can say other than we found land. We've asked the land, and feel quite strongly the land would love to have us there. There are quite a lot of legal loopholes that we have to jump through, which is why it's kind of in the laps of the universe at the moment. And yes, and also that our membership have walked the land as well and had that same feeling, that they feel very called to be on that land. And it has woodland, and it also has water. So two of our key criteria. So that's what we're... Oh, excuse me. I sneezed on telly. So that's where our heart is. And I think one of the other things I want to share, because that's a really important question, is when we started this journey, when we looked a few steps ahead, it sometimes feels really overwhelming and scary. And one of the things that we've agreed to do is that we'll just take the next step. So that's what we're doing. We're pursuing this land, and we're just taking the next step. There are lots of questions that we don't know the answer to, and we don't know how it's going to unfold, but we just keep taking the next step. And every time you take that step, you learn something new. So maybe we won't end up with this land, but wherever we end up in the end, we will be a lot wiser, and have a much greater understanding of what we have to do to materialize our vision.
Well, birthing anything, which is the phase that you're in, is a particularly difficult time for anything. And I don't think that you need to know how. You only need to know why and what you're doing and why you're doing it. And the how will unfold.
Yes. So let's imagine that we've realised our vision. We've set up co-housing, very much like Findhorn. We want those eco-dwellings, and we would be one of the first rural co-housing projects for seniors in Wales. So yeah, let's imagine that we've set that up. What would be some of the other really important things that you'd want to share with us about how we can go about protecting and sustaining that community?
Well, I think one of the things that I noticed, that not only, well, there are few communities who are doing it, but I think the most important thing, other than, you know, establishing what you've done, you're establishing your land, establishing people who are part of that community, is what is the core intention, and how can the skills pool amongst you develop into a sustainable business model. Now, if you think about, for instance, I'm just taking this as an example, the monks that I encountered when I was living in Scotland, Findhorn, I used to go to Plusgarden Abbey to listen to Vespers in the evening, and it was absolutely the highlight of my week, was to go and listen, you know, sit in this beautiful abbey. So it was, if we think about the monks, and just to use them as a metaphor, their faith is what drew them together. But what made them sustainable was brewing this gorgeous whiskey, which they then sold to the public. A community that develops a sustainable business model. And it can be anything. I'm just using that example because they had this shop attached to the abbey, and I'm sure the monks were all loving their whiskey as well. They were such a jolly lot. But you could go and buy this gorgeous, gorgeous whiskey, and it was a sort of niche item, and one felt that you'd been a part of not just the Vespers, but you'd walked away with something that was the lifeblood of their collaboration, of their cooperation. So whether it's you crochet gorgeous blankets, or you make, mini movie productions, or you offer retreats, or like what Findhorn does is offer, conferences, educational programs, you get to decide. But I think that's where co-housing and community takes on a completely different level of meaning and level of sustainability, because then everyone gets to thrive under that model. If one is retreating into, and of course there are little subgroupings that happen and all of that, but if there's one overriding desire or project that one's undertaking that becomes part of the business model, then I think that's what makes it work.
And that's a really reassuring understanding, because a lot of people don't realise that when you legally register as a housing cooperative, that cooperative is considered as an enterprise. And so it's more than just paying rent to live there as a member. The cooperative can be the business owner itself, and that's a core part of our model, is being able to support. For anyone to be a member of our community, the first question is, what are you passionate about? What would you love to do? And what would you love to spend your time doing? And the cooperative is there to support members to do that, to pursue their dreams. And I think there's something there about, I think it helps take some of the conflict out of it. It's interesting, whenever you talk to people about co-housing, the first thing they want to know is, well, how are you going to deal with the conflict? And so first of all, there's that assumption that there's going to be conflict, and we're not naive. Of course there will be. But I think having our own independent spaces and having the cooperative support us in our creative enterprises will be one of two of the ways that we can help to minimise conflict. But I'm aware of our time here, Frances, because I wanted to come to you about that one, and just if we could take a little moment to just see what kind of lessons you learned about how you manage conflict in a community.
Well, first of all, I wanted to say, Siobhan, based on the point that you mentioned before, is I would invite you actually to be as clear as you can about how you want to function, how you and Francesca, you're agreeing and are on the same page about several things. So the clearer you are, the less you're going to attract anyone who's not going to easily, and look, living, any co-housing community is difficult, but in essence, and it's not to create something exclusive, but it's also keeping the members safe, and that is to, in essence, vet people who are coming in. So you don't just want anybody. So in your co-housing community, you want to know that the people that you are carefully handpicking to be your neighbors and to be pages you, even if they're disagreements. Sorry, what did you say, Siobhan?
I was just, you started to freeze, so I was just unclearing it symbolically. Oh. But you're fine, you're back again, it worked.
Okay. Did you understand? Was I making sense?
And I want you to just repeat that point, because I think it was a really important point and it froze at one point. So could you just say it again about vetting people?
Yes, so the people that you're handpicking to live alongside you as your neighbors, as your sisters and brothers in your community, you want to know that there is a level of understanding of commonality, despite that there are going to be differences, but there is a shared value system. Otherwise, there is too much of a schism, and you, as the pioneers of this co-housing project, you get to choose. And that's the exciting part, is that you really get to have a sense of, well, who do we want to have? Who do we want? Who do I want to live with? What kind of person would I like to have as my neighbor? So I think that's something to think about. And then, again, I think something we've spoken about before, but which I also think is very important, is leadership. How is leadership rotational? Is there a hierarchy? I think that's also an important. Am I freezing?
No, you're doing okay. It is freezing a bit, but we're still with you. So yeah, talking about the leadership and what that looks like, and
leadership structures are very, very important. And I think that's why what people are asking when they're saying, how do we deal with conflict? What they're actually saying is, who's in charge? Who do I go to, and what system and protocol do I follow when I have a grievance in the space? And at Fintel, we used to have confrontations where we used to communicate but what was going on and be open and talk about it, but there was very much a protocol on how that was done. It wasn't a free for all, and that keeps everyone safe.
Oh, Frances, I could sit here all day. I think we definitely need to have another conversation, because I feel like we've just scratched the surface. But I think you've given an incredible lot of food for thought for all of those people out there who are thinking about co-housing as an option to pursue, and given us some of the key things that we need to be considering. And definitely Francesca and I think have got a lot more conversations to have around that whole thing of leadership and the way of running it, as do our members as well, our current members. But Frances, once again, I want to honour Zoom for giving us the opportunity to talk, and even with all its limitations and freezing and disappearing, it's been fantastic, and I'm very, very much looking forward to continuing this conversation with you.
Likewise, Siobhan, thank you so much for this time. It's always a pleasure to talk to you about anything. I really enjoy the time we spend together, and I hope this has been helpful. And I want to also present that this is no longer, what you're doing is actually a necessity in society. It's not, I don't think we have an option anymore. So well done, and have a wonderful weekend.
You too, my love. Wherever you are in the world, if the sun isn't shining in your skies, may it shine in your heart. This is Siobhan Reardon and Elsa signing out. Have a beautiful day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.